In the past 10 years, China has started one of the biggest global projects that has ever been thought of. It affects almost every part of the world. It is crazy to think that China has put an amazing $1.3 trillion into more than 140 countries to build everything from super-fast railroads to huge hydroelectric dams. The Belt and Road Initiative is the name of this huge project. It's China's big plan to gain more power and influence around the world by making huge investments. There is a huge project called the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor that is still not finished. It cost an amazing $60 billion to start. Or look at Kazakhstan's $9 billion Khorgos Gateway dry port. Many experts now say that subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon will help you to never miss a new video. The same experts say this project in Kazakhstan wasn't really needed. The world is full of these huge billion-dollar projects, and not just in poor countries. Countries like Greece, Italy, and Montenegro have even taken billions of dollars from China to start their own big projects. It's the same thing though. A lot of these projects are either not finished, way over budget, or have been given up on totally. It's even worse now that many of the countries that were happy to borrow money from China are having a tough time repaying it. It's thought that more than a quarter of these loans have been returned, which has cost China more than $240 billion in bailout money. They thought the Belt and Road Initiative would be the crown jewel of Xi Jinping's foreign policy. Instead, it has gone from being called the project of the century to the failure of the century. Let's talk about what the Belt and Road Initiative is, why it's not going as planned, and what this means for China right now. To be fair though, not every Belt and Road project has been a total failure. Many of them have gone over budget or not worked out in the end, but some have been good, like creating jobs and bringing investment to the countries that hosted them. For instance, the Forest City housing buildings in Malaysia did have some good effects. Still, as time went on, the hard truths about many other projects became clear. The Belt and Road Initiative, which began in 2013, was China's big plan to spread its power around the world. The two most important parts were the Belt and the Road. With stops in Kazakhstan and Ukraine, the Belt was supposed to connect China to Central Asia and Europe by road. Despite its name, the road focused on building sea routes and facilities in Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. It's interesting that a lot of these projects were already in the works before the Belt and Road name came up. This label was more of a business trick. The program covers a lot of different areas, but most of the money has been spent on energy projects. In recent years, this dominance has waned a bit, but in 2020, energy spending still made up about 40% of the whole. A country agrees to work with Chinese companies on a new energy or transportation project, and the Chinese companies quickly start planning and building the project. Even better, Chinese workers are sent in to do the building, and when the job is done, they go back home. The name Belt and Road makes it sound like these projects are part of a big, well-thought-out plan for the whole world. They're really more like a bunch of separate projects spread out around the world, with no real core plan. As you might guess, this has caused a lot of problems. So why did China start building such huge infrastructure projects on 5 continents? To understand why, you need to think about the Silk Road, which was the project's original idea. China had one of the largest and most powerful economies in the world for a long time. Early successes in farming and manufacturing made items from China very popular all over the world. Because of this need, the Silk Road was built. For more than 1,500 years, it was a trade path that linked China to Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. It not only made China rich, but it also spread its power all over the world. Long before phones, planes, and the internet made it easy to connect with people around the world. But by the 18th century, Europe had begun to industrialize, and China's position of power began to change away from it. In 2013, a couple of hundred years later, Xi Jinping wants to bring back that old greatness with the Belt and Road Initiative. One of the main goals of the BRI is to make China stronger and give it more impact around the world. China wants to build strategic ties with other countries by using loans and funds to get in. This is similar to how the US started the Marshall Plan in Europe after World War II. In the energy sector, this is especially true. Russia, Qatar, and Malaysia, which have a lot of natural resources, have been the biggest receivers of Chinese Belt and Road loans. By making friends with these countries, China is making sure it can get things it will need in the future. China's need to use its huge amounts of money saved up is another important reason for its investments around the world. By making things and parts for many companies as the world's factory, China has saved trillions of dollars in foreign currency. It looked like a good idea to put that money into building projects in other countries. A third reason that isn't talked about as much is to fix China's economy's overcapacity. As the country grew quickly, its businesses, such as those that make steel, cement, aluminum, and building materials, grew to make huge amounts of goods. But as demand around the world has dropped and some businesses have moved away from China, many Chinese companies haven't had enough work to keep their huge plants and staff busy. China could give these businesses something to do by working on big government projects around the world. China wanted to do three things at once: increase its power abroad, make good use of its foreign reserves, and keep its industries running smoothly. These projects were also meant to help China get back the money it borrowed from other countries. But what started out as a huge success is now giving China a lot of trouble. A lot of experts and commentators have said that China has taken on too much. They have racked up unbelievable amounts of debt, which has made people very worried about the long-term health of their economy. If you think that China's huge loan program could cause the economy to crash, you can bet on it by betting on their GDP or inflation rate. If you think TikTok might have to sell its US business, you can also trade on that. With its user-friendly features and regulated market, KI's website makes it very simple. China has been giving money to hundreds of countries over the past 10 years as it tries to become a world power. Now, though, they have a big problem. Many of these countries are having a hard time paying back. What went wrong? Because China controls the media and keeps things secret, it's hard to get specific information. However, we do know that China has started thousands of projects in over 150 countries. There are a lot of problems with the Belt and Road Initiative. First, many of these projects were started without the right checks and balances in place. A lot of the countries that China lends money to are growing or emerging nations, which means they're not very rich. Usually, these countries wouldn't be able to pay for big infrastructure projects like roads and railroads. But China stepped in and gave a lot of money with not many conditions. When organizations like the IMF give poor countries money, they put a lot of conditions on it. These checks and balances are meant to make sure the money is used wisely. But this process takes a long time, and there's no promise that the country will get the money even then. But China's method skipped over a lot of these safety measures, which made things more dangerous. China looked like a good alternative to groups like the IMF, which have strict rules. Other countries could agree to China's payment terms instead of going through long background checks. Those terms were tough, though. The terms of these loans were usually shorter than those from the IMF, and the interest rates were much higher. As soon as it became clear how easy it was to get the money, hundreds of countries from Africa to Asia, Europe, and South America jumped at the chance. Companies from China quickly set up shop all over the world and started working on projects. BRI began in 2013. The credit ratings, which show how likely it is that China will not pay back its loans to emerging countries, have dropped sharply. These loans were once considered to have a moderate amount of risk, but now they're so low that they're almost considered junk, which means it's very unlikely that they will be paid back. When you look at the list of China's biggest BRI borrowers, this bad choice of loans becomes even more clear. Even though their economies are in bad shape, Turkey and Egypt stand out because they each got around $1 billion in loans. Egypt, for example, is very close to losing all of its money. It's not just loans to developing countries that are making things hard. Rich countries are also feeling the pinch. Over time, the amount of Chinese loans going to troubled countries, those that are at war or need to restructure their loans, has soared. In the early days of the BRI, only about 5% of loans were having trouble. This number barely rose above 20%, even with the sanctions against Venezuela in 2014. At the time, this level was thought to be doable. As of now, things are much worse than they were then. The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI of China, has quickly gotten worse over the last 5 years. Many developing countries had to shut down their businesses and spend a lot of money on things like furlough programs because of the pandemic. This put a huge strain on their already weak finances. Because of this, many of these countries couldn't pay back their loans on time. On top of that, the war in Ukraine has made things even worse. About 60% of China's BRI loans are now in distress, which means there's a good chance they won't be paid back. Since China has put about $1.3 trillion into the BRI, this could mean that $780 billion in loans have not been paid back. That's about the size of Switzerland's whole economy and more than twice as much debt as Evergrande. What's wrong with the BRI is more than just bad timing, though. The choice of projects has been very bad, and the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka may be the best example of this. The United States and India had turned down this project because they didn't think it could be done, but China chose to fund it anyway. A lot of money was put into this project, as with many others in the BRI, and Chinese companies were brought in to build it. However, Sri Lanka could not keep up with its loan payments by 2017, and the port was eventually leased to China for 99 years. There were also claims of cheating in this project because Chinese officials gave a lot of money to the president's election campaign at the time. This is just one of many rushed projects that were either not finished or were linked to claims of fraud, bribery, or violations of workers' rights. The World Bank says that these problems have come up in about 35% of all Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) projects. Because China wants to see the BRI through to the end, it has cut back on the amount of money it lends to other countries. The amount of money China used to send to BRI countries has slowed down, according to the numbers. Now China is asking for its loans to be paid back and stopping the flow of money leaving the country. China should now be getting paid back for all the huge loans it has given out over the years. A lot of this money, though, might not be paid back. China is now in a tough spot. It can either put more money into these risky projects in the hopes that they finally start making money, or it can stop losing money on them and stop the cash flow. Many of these projects will probably be scrapped if China decides to leave, because the host countries can't afford to keep going with them. China is not doing well economically, and its international projects are beginning to look a lot like the over-indebted housing developments happening in China. Looking back, it's clear that China went too far, but back then, many Western countries were blamed for not getting involved in projects like these. China took the lead, especially in places like Africa and Central Asia, where it gained power and established itself as the world's most important power. But with interest rates going up and the world economy expected to slow down, this once ambitious plan may backfire and hurt China's image, which it has worked hard to earn.